The auditorium at NYU Stern School of Business buzzed with anticipation. A crowd of over 500 students, professors, and journalists gathered for the annual Voices of Leadership event. It was a prestigious platform where select students gave personal speeches reflecting on leadership, values, and personal growth. This year, however, the crowd wasn't buzzing because of the usual star students. It was the final guest speaker that had stirred the storm of interest. He wasn't just a student. He was a Trump. Barron William Trump, tall, composed, now a 21-year-old junior majoring in business strategy and behavioral economics, had rarely spoken in public since his father, Donald J. Trump, reclaimed the presidency in a stunning political comeback. He had been seen at a few state dinners, occasionally photographed during holidays at Mar-a-Lago. But mostly, Barron had stayed quiet, intensely private despite being under the world's biggest microscope. So when NYU Stern announced that Barron Trump would be delivering an emotional speech titled "The Man Behind the Walls," social media exploded. Was he going to criticize his father? Defend him? Reveal something? The room fell silent as Barron entered dressed in a simple dark navy suit, no tie. He smiled nervously at the crowd and approached the podium. A hush followed. He placed his notes down, looked into the crowd, then paused for nearly 10 seconds. Long enough for every phone camera to start rolling. Long enough for millions across America, now watching live on YouTube and Twitter, to lean in closer. Then, in a calm but emotionally charged voice, Barron began. When people hear my name, they don't think of me. They think of him. Donald Trump, President of the United States, billionaire, businessman, controversial leader. But today, I want to tell you about someone you haven't met. The father. The flawed, funny, overprotective, and human man who raised me. The room held its breath. I didn't grow up like most kids. I didn't get snow days, I got Secret Service drills. I didn't get bedtime stories, I got financial summaries from the Trump Organization. But I also got tickle fights on Sundays, late-night talks about dreams, and the weirdest sandwiches you can imagine. My dad's go-to was peanut butter, turkey, and jalapenos. Laughter broke out, easing the tension. You've seen the man behind the desk at the Oval Office. I want to show you the man behind the scenes. A man who didn't know how to say, "I love you" in a normal way, but showed it by sending me 3 bodyguards when I was just late for class. Barron's voice cracked slightly. He didn't look down at his notes. He was speaking directly from the heart now. Growing up as a Trump isn't easy. It's not just the wealth, the name, or the politics. It's the expectation. To be tough. To be bold. To never show weakness. But Dad, if you're watching this, I hope it's okay I say this. You were never weak when you cried watching me walk into kindergarten. You were never weak when you told me you missed Grandpa Fred. You were never weak when you told me you were scared, Scared I'd hate you for the life your decisions forced me to live. The auditorium was dead silent. A few students in the front row had tears in their eyes. One professor whispered to another, "I never expected this." Barron continued, now with a subtle tremble in his voice. The world saw a man shouting on stages. I saw a man whispering in prayer when Mom was sick. The world saw a man tweeting at midnight. I saw a man pacing alone at 3 a.m. asking himself if he was a good father. The camera angle shifted to a live YouTube stream where over 9.4 million people were watching within the first 15 minutes. I don't agree with every decision my father made. And I don't expect anyone in this room to agree with all of his politics. But if leadership means owning your choices, standing by your people, and protecting what you love, then I think I've had a pretty decent teacher. A wave of claps broke out, light at first, then swelling into thunderous applause. Barron took a sip of water. His hands were visibly shaking now. In this world of judgment, memes, and outrage, I just wanted a few minutes today to give you a glimpse of a man who gave me more than a famous name. He gave me grit. He gave me heart. And whether history will love him or hate him, I'll always be proud to call him Dad. The standing ovation began instantly. Professors stood. Students wiped their eyes. Even a few reporters looked stunned, some whispering into microphones, he just changed the narrative. As Barron stepped away from the podium, the emotion on his face was real. He had no idea what was about to happen next. As Barron Trump walked off the stage, the applause didn't die down. It intensified. Even faculty members, who had long kept their distance from political associations, stood in admiration, not necessarily for the president's son, but for the young man who had just bared his soul. Backstage, Barron took a deep breath. His hands were still trembling. The NYU event coordinator handed him a bottle of water and said quietly, "You didn't just give a speech. You opened a door the world's been trying to peek behind for years. Meanwhile, outside the auditorium, a crowd had formed. People who couldn't get seats had streamed the entire speech live. Some held posters of protest, others held supportive signs, but by the end of his speech, many of those protest signs had slowly lowered. People looked at each other, confused. Was it okay to feel moved by a Trump? Within 10 minutes of the event ending, #Barron Trump speech was the #1 trend on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Across the nation, CNN's Anderson Cooper was first to react live. That was one of the most genuine, heartfelt speeches I've seen from a public figure's child ever. Not political, not defensive, just human. And in a time where our politics feel anything but, that speech might be the crack in the ice we've needed. Over on Fox News, Tucker Carlson's tone was sharp but approving. For years, the media treated Barron Trump as a silent enigma. Today, he proved he's a force, intelligent, self-aware, and emotionally grounded. And let's be clear, he just made a lot of people uncomfortable because he reminded us that even the most controversial figures are still parents. President Donald J. Trump, watching from the Oval Office, had paused a national security briefing to catch the live stream. He sat in his chair, uncharacteristically quiet. Melania Trump sat beside him, her eyes welling up. Barron had not told either of them about the content of the speech. He had just told his mother, "I need to speak my truth, Mom. It's time." President Trump's usual bombastic persona seemed to vanish. After a long pause, he finally muttered, "He's incredible." Melania gently touched his arm and whispered, "He's your son." Of course he is. Later that evening, Trump posted a rare non-political tweet. "I've made a lot of speeches in my life, but today I was the audience and my son gave one of the best I've ever heard. I am proud beyond words. Thank you, Barron." The tweet exploded with millions of likes and retweets, not just from conservatives but also from independents and even a few left-leaning celebrities. In the streets of America, on college campuses in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Texas, students were holding viewing parties. Some called it a turning point, others a PR move, but most agreed on one thing: they had never expected to connect with a Trump on an emotional level. A video began circulating. Two NYU students, one wearing a Biden 2024 shirt, the other a Trump 2024 cap, hugging after the speech ended. "Man, I don't care what side you're on," the Biden shirt student said. "That was just real. And we need more of real right now." Social media was ablaze with emotional testimonials. "I'm not a Trump supporter, but Barron's speech? That hit me right in the gut. I never thought I'd cry during something involving the Trump family. Guess what? I did. This is how healing starts, through stories, not shouting." And then came the celebrity reactions. Taylor Swift, known for her political openness, tweeted, "Barron Trump just reminded us that empathy transcends politics. What a brave speech." Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson posted an Instagram video. "Takes guts to talk about your father like that, especially when your father is the most polarizing man on the planet. Mad respect, young man." Meanwhile, Barron had retreated to his dorm room. He ignored his buzzing phone. He didn't open social media. Instead, he sat by his window overlooking Washington Square Park. Lights flickered across the city, but all he could hear was the echo of his last words on stage. "Whether history will love him or hate him, I'll always be proud to call him Dad." His roommate, Andre, one of his closest and most trusted friends at NYU, walked in. "Bro, you just caused an earthquake." Barron chuckled, still wiping at the corner of his eye. "Good kind or bad kind? You just humanized the most inhumanized man in the country." "Dude, that's a good kind." Barron finally smiled. But the aftermath was just beginning. The nation wasn't done reacting. Not by a long shot. Because what Barron had done had opened a door no one knew existed. And now, everyone wanted to know what was behind it. "Well, Peter, I've heard a lot of speeches in my time, some good, some great, and some not so great. But Barron's was special. I'm proud of my son. He's a fine young man. He's had to deal with a lot, and for him to open up like that, it was incredible. I think the whole country saw a side of him and of me that they haven't seen before. And you know what? That's okay. Sometimes it's time to let the truth come out." He paused, glancing over at the reporters. "What you saw wasn't just me as a politician or a businessman. It was me as a father. And I'm proud of that. The press room erupted in murmurs of surprise. It was a rare moment of vulnerability from the president. And the media noticed. On the evening shows, Chris Cuomo from CNN highlighted the importance of the moment. We've never seen this side of Donald Trump before. A father talking about his son, publicly and without pretense. It humanizes him in a way that's unprecedented. Barron Trump's speech changed the narrative. But it wasn't just the political sphere that was taking notice. Hollywood was also abuzz. Oprah Winfrey, who had been notoriously outspoken about the Trump family, tweeted, "Barron Trump's speech was not just about politics. It was about family, love, and the human experience. Bravo, Barron. The world needed to hear your truth." Across the world, as the news spread internationally, the speech became a global sensation. In London, the BBC aired a special segment exploring Barron Trump's emergence as a new voice in American politics. For years, Barron Trump was an enigma. A son of the most divisive president in modern history, he was often shielded from the public eye. But his speech at NYU Stern showed us that even in the most powerful families, there is room for vulnerability and truth, the BBC anchor remarked. In Berlin, German news outlets focused on the implications of Barron's speech for international diplomacy. Was it possible that Barron's softer, more empathetic approach could play a role in shaping future U.S. foreign policy? Analysts debated whether Barron might be the bridge between a politically divided America and the rest of the world. The social media storm. Back in the U.S., the reaction from the general public was just as intense. Online discussions, fueled by viral clips, explored everything from Barron's upbringing to his father's legacy. It was clear that something profound had happened. Many younger Americans, particularly those who had grown disillusioned with the political system, found themselves inspired by Barron's willingness to speak his truth. A TikTok video showcasing a compilation of Barron's speech paired with a voiceover reading his most emotional lines had garnered over 5 million views by midday. The caption read, "A son speaks of his father, can we learn from this?" Even Instagram influencers began posting tributes to Barron's message, with one popular influencer writing, "Not a political statement, just a human one." Barron Trump reminded us that even those we disagree with have a story we might not know. The world needs more of this. It seemed the world was ready for a new kind of conversation, one where vulnerability and empathy took precedence over political division. A private moment. As the world continued to react, Barron found himself at the center of an emotional storm. But in the quiet of his dorm room, he sat by the window once more, reflecting on everything that had happened. Andre, his roommate, entered the room carrying a pizza box. "Dude, I still can't believe that just happened. You've changed the game." Barron chuckled, wiping his brow. "I didn't mean to. I just had to say it. But now it feels like everything's changed." The weight of what he had said, what he had shared, was starting to sink in. But Barron wasn't afraid. He had spoken from the heart. And that was something he could live with. The days following Barron Trump's speech were a blur for him. While the world continued to dissect every word he had spoken, Barron's life at NYU resumed its rhythm. Classes, late-night study sessions, and weekend hangouts with friends all felt strangely normal. Yet something had irrevocably shifted. His phone was flooded with messages from people he had never met. Some were supportive, others critical, but all were speaking from a place of raw emotion. Even his father, who was known for his stoic demeanor, sent Barron a message. "Son, you did great. I've always believed in you. But today, you surpassed even my expectations. Proud of you. Don't let anyone take that away." For Barron, it was a message that held deep meaning. His father's words, though often indirect, were always sincere. And today, they felt different. More heartfelt than ever before. Media frenzy and the first interview. As the news cycle evolved, Barron's speech transformed into a media phenomenon. Every major talk show wanted an interview. Every political pundit wanted his thoughts on his father's presidency, the future of the Republican Party, and the direction America was heading. But Barron, true to his nature, remained elusive. He had no intention of capitalizing on his moment in the spotlight. He wasn't a politician, nor did he aspire to be. His speech wasn't meant to change anyone's mind about the politics of the Trump administration. It was simply a personal reflection, a son's tribute to his father. But it wasn't long before Barron agreed to sit down with Anderson Cooper for an exclusive interview on CNN. The setup was simple. No hard-hitting questions about policy, no interrogation about his father's political future. Instead, the focus was on Barron, on who he was beyond the shadows of his last name. The interview began as Barron, seated across from Cooper in a serene New York City studio, offered a slight smile. Anderson Cooper. Barron, thank you for being here today. We all saw your speech and I think the world was moved. You've become a symbol of something many didn't know they needed to see. Humanity in the midst of a political storm. How do you feel about the way it's been received? Barron shifted in his seat, taking a deep breath before responding. Barron Trump, I didn't expect this kind of reaction, to be honest. When I stood up there at NYU, it was just me speaking from the heart about my father. But seeing the way people have connected with it, it's overwhelming and kind of beautiful in a way. I think we've lost sight of the fact that we can still be human, even when we disagree on so many things. Cooper nodded, leaning in with genuine curiosity. Anderson Cooper, you mentioned your father in a way that many people never have, especially publicly. You spoke about him not just as a political figure, but as a father. Can you elaborate on what that experience was like, being the son of someone who's so well known and at times so polarizing? Barron paused. He wasn't accustomed to speaking about his family in such an open manner, but in this moment it felt right. Barron Trump, it's not easy. People have this image of him, and a lot of times it's not fair. They don't know what it's like to be his kid. To see him care about us, he's human too, just like everyone else. I've watched him work so hard for everything, and I've seen how much he loves our family. It's not always public, but trust me, it's there. The interview continued with Barron giving a rare and candid glimpse into the private life of the Trump family. He spoke about his childhood, his bond with his mother, and how he tried to balance the demands of being a public figure's son while finding his own path. The emotional impact. As the days turned into weeks, the impact of Barron's speech continued to echo across the globe. In Washington, political analysts started to speculate about what Barron's future might hold. Was he the future of the Republican Party? Would he eventually take up his father's mantle, or was he destined to forge a completely different path? One of the most poignant reflections came from Jeb Bush, former governor of Florida, during an interview on MSNBC. I think Barron Trump just did something remarkable. He brought something to the table that we've all been missing in politics: humanity. Regardless of where you stand politically, we should all take a moment to reflect on how we speak to each other, how we understand each other. Barron's speech reminded us of that. And even those who didn't agree with his father's politics found themselves rethinking their stance on the Trump family. It wasn't just about agreeing or disagreeing, it was about recognizing that, in the end, we're all trying to make our way through the world in our own way. Barron's new role. Barron didn't choose to be a symbol. He hadn't aimed to change the political landscape, but that's exactly what had happened. His speech had inadvertently broken down walls between people who had long been at odds. It wasn't just a moment in the media, his words resonated deeply, especially with young Americans. At NYU, students rallied together, creating new initiatives for more civil discourse on campus. Students for Political Empathy, a new student group, was born in the wake of Barron's speech. They aimed to bridge divides between people of different political backgrounds, inspired by the very message Barron had put forth that day. For Barron, it was a humbling experience. He didn't seek accolades or recognition, but the ripple effect his words had caused became undeniable. He had created a new platform, not through policy or power, but through simple honesty. In private moments with his family, Barron reflected on the weight of his newfound visibility. His parents, particularly his father, had always warned him about the pressures that came with being in the public eye. But now Barron understood the true power of his voice. He was no longer just the son of a controversial figure. He was a young man with something meaningful to say, and his story was just beginning. It had been several weeks since Barron Trump's unforgettable speech, and the world had not stopped talking about it. His emotional revelation had become a moment of collective reckoning, not just for him and his family, but for an entire nation. The headlines may have faded, but the echoes of his words were still resounding. Barron's college life had returned to some sense of normalcy, but it was clear that everything had changed. Everywhere he went, people would recognize him, not just as a Trump, but as someone who had stepped out from the shadows and revealed a piece of his soul. It was an unfamiliar feeling, one that he hadn't been prepared for. The Trump family reunites. One evening, Barron's parents, Donald and Melania Trump, arrived in New York for a visit. They had been busy with their respective engagements, but with everything that had happened in the past few weeks, they knew it was important to come together as a family. Barron had invited them to dinner, a rare moment where they could just be a family without cameras or microphones. As Barron met his parents in the lobby of his dorm building, his father gave him a tight hug. The kind of hug only a parent could give after a monumental moment. "Donald Trump, son, you've done something amazing. I'm proud of you. You've taken this family story and made it your own." Barron smiled, still a little overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had happened. "Barron Trump, thanks, Dad. I never thought it would turn into all this. But I meant every word." Melania Trump, standing nearby, nodded in agreement. Her eyes, usually guarded, softened as she looked at Barron. "Melania Trump, you spoke from your heart, Barron. That's what matters. People saw that. And they saw a side of you of us that they didn't know existed. It was beautiful." They shared a quiet moment, the weight of the past few weeks hanging in the air. Despite the political divide that had followed their family for years, they now shared something more intimate, a recognition of each other's humanity. The press conference, moving forward. A few days later, Barron's life took yet another unexpected turn. A major press conference was scheduled not for a political announcement but for a discussion about his future and how he planned to move forward. Barron had agreed to speak, but this time he wasn't alone. His parents, Donald and Melania Trump, stood by his side as he addressed the world. The questions this time were different. No one was asking about his father's policies or the future of the Trump family in politics. Instead, the focus was on Barron's next steps, what he wanted to do with his newfound platform, how he intended to contribute to society, and what role, if any, he saw for himself in the future. Reporter: "Barron, after your speech, there's been a lot of speculation about your future. Do you have any interest in politics? Could we one day see you running for office?" Barron took a deep breath, his calm demeanor never wavering. "Barron Trump, politics is an arena that requires a deep commitment. It's not something I'm pursuing right now. I'm focused on my studies, my personal growth, and understanding the world around me. I've seen the way people are divided, and I think there's a lot of room for empathy in politics. But for now, I just want to be me. I want to make a difference in the world, but I want to do it on my own terms." His words struck a chord. It wasn't the usual political rhetoric, it was the answer of a young man who wanted to carve his own path, free from the legacy of his father. It was a message that resonated deeply with people who had long wondered what Barron would become. For the first time, Barron Trump was more than just a surname, he was an individual with his own hopes and dreams. Barron's future, a new era. In the following months, Barron's influence only grew. He began working on several projects related to youth mentorship and political empathy, aligning with organizations that sought to bridge divides between young people of differing political views. Barron was becoming an advocate for a new generation, one that would approach disagreements not with anger but with understanding. His story wasn't just about a son revealing his love for his father, it was about how a simple act of vulnerability could transform the world's perception of someone and how one person's honesty could begin a movement of change. One evening, Barron stood in front of a classroom at NYU Stern, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. His words, though softer than before, still carried the same weight. "Barron Trump, I've realized that the world doesn't need more people trying to change it through force. It needs more people willing to listen, to empathize, and to connect. That's the future I believe in." As he spoke, his classmates nodded in agreement. Barron had not only touched their hearts, but he had also inspired them to think differently about the future, about how they, too, could shape the world with compassion. A son's legacy. It wasn't lost on Barron that his father's political journey had been filled with triumphs and controversies. But Barron was determined to pave his own way, to leave behind a legacy that was grounded in the power of human connection rather than political power. For Barron, the world now saw him for who he truly was, not just as the son of Donald Trump, but as a young man with the courage to stand up, to speak from the heart, and to inspire others to do the same. And as the years went on, Barron Trump's story would continue to unfold. It wasn't a story of politics or power, it was a story of a son finding his voice, of a young man who used his platform to bring people together, not tear them apart. In the end, that would be Barron's greatest achievement, not the speeches, not the headlines, but the quiet, powerful legacy he left in the hearts of those who believed in something bigger than politics.